Hey everyone, it's Katie from Temple of Cosmic Astrology, and today I am so honored and excited to have my amazing friend Tiarnie and brilliant astrologer with me. Today we are going to be delving into all things astrology. We just want to have a really casual chat together. Her and I go in all kinds of places when we meet, and we really just wanted to share this with you. Instead of us two just having a conversation between ourselves like we often have, we thought, why not share this with everybody? So, Tiarnie, welcome.
Yay!
I'm so excited, love. This has been like such a long time in the making, like way too long. So,
Yeah.
do you just want to start by introducing yourself a little bit, talking about your branch of astrology, how you came into it, wherever you feel like beginning with it?
And then you can answer those same questions.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a question bounce is what
Exactly.
we'll do. So we both have been into astrology since we were 9. And it's just been my love, like my language and my love and my passion and my obsession. I mean, I have Pluto in the first house, so it's pretty easy to be obsessed with something that sort of consumes you, which is astrology. And so now these days, so I mean, I'm a self-taught astrologer. I've done some of Katie's courses. I love the Leo King. I've got 5 million astrology books that my computer's sitting on that I'm staring at, because that's all you do is you buy books. Bought many books off Katie actually before she moved to Portugal, and that Sabian symbol book is so good. And I just dove into the sort of the Chandra symbol, and oh my God, oh my God. My sun in Chandra is unbelievable.
Really?
So different to the Sabian, and it just blew my mind. Like, I screenshotted it, and reading it out, I was like, holy shit balls, this is me. This is really me. And my Mars symbol actually was really bang on. So I'm going to do more with Chandra. But yeah, so books and obsession, and just like, I teach basic. I love foundational astrology. I love it because I want people to enter it. And my biggest, I think, one of my biggest passions is I want everyone to know how to read their own chart. Like, that to me is the exciting thing. I want everyone to be on some level an astrologer, not an Instagram astrologer, but an actual know their chart.
On Instagram.
We can't go there. No. We might, but yeah.
We could.
Yeah. And I just, so that's the base level, and it's just understanding the language. For me, I believe astrology is really easy, and it can be so elitist on some sort of astrology level. Like, it's this elitism, and we're going to talk about all these things and no one's going to understand. But if you understand the planets, if you understand the houses, and if you understand the signs, literally, and even the elements, I mean, I just teach elements for my class 1, literally blows everyone's mind. They just cannot believe that they're more of this element, or their husband's this element. And just knowing the elements, and even just the I don't know, do you call modality or quality? I just switch between. It annoys the shit out of me, to be honest.
I think I say modality.
I think I do too. But then sometimes I accidentally say quality.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know. I feel like modality resonates more.
Same.
Yeah, I think modality.
Yeah.
But I think foundations are so important. It's the same for me. Like, I love teaching the basics for sure, for the same perspective of, like, it brings me so much joy to bring in newbies, because, like you said, like, if we all just know this basic foundational platform of astrology, it offers you so much, whether you choose to take it deeper and study it like we have been since we were like 9 years old, or if you just dabble yourself just to follow your transits, it can really offer you so much. So I love that. I love that we've always been on the same page with that.
Yeah, we so are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it. I have just created, I don't know if you've even seen it, but Astropreneurs. So this is Astropreneurs is my new offering, which is for businesses. So I'm looking deep into the natal chart of my clients as in, you know, all the career houses and money houses and stuff, and really looking at those houses and dissecting them, looking at the rulers, just looking at what everything's doing in their natal, and then taking on to give them what's going on. So it's sort of this astropreneurs for entrepreneurs sort of thing going on, but it's for anyone really, but it's pretty cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Because I think actually in every single career house, I have planets. So
yes,
I didn't know you had that. I don't know how I missed that, but I will be arranging that with you 100% because
we'll just do a swap, let's be honest.
True. So whatever you want from me, we can definitely swap. No, that sounds amazing though. And I think because people are really searching for that, because it doesn't always have to necessarily be career either. Like it's the bigger purpose, that like that is just one facet. I think we've been so conditioned in that, like, you know, capitalistic 9 to 5, like I have my career and then everything fits into this perfect little box. But like when we are able to synthesize that connection between like the 2nd, the 6th and the 10th, and how those 3 are working in unison, it's so much bigger than that. Like what you do to earn money is just such a small facet of what you are here to do, I think. So that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, and I mean, those 3 houses are so predominant, and then adding the 11th, which is sort of like the gifts that you get once you sort of like what's bestowed upon you, that 11th house. I mean, very traditional astrology, the 11th being like one of the luckiest houses, right? Like that's, I'm not a traditional astrologer, but I do dabble in traditional astrology. And then the 8th house, of course, being other people's money. But, you know, it is about the synthesis, exactly what you said, of it all coming together, and just it's just constant layers upon layers. And I think the thing that people often think is when you come to see us, we're going to go, you will be a hairdresser, tick, married with 3 children, it will come easily, tick. Like it's just no chart. And I've always taught like that and read like that, and it wasn't until I would listen to Stephen Forrest actually give a bit of a talk about it. He's just like, you know, your chart does not tell you exactly what you're meant to do. It's about you activating your chart. Of course, the nodes come into it. Of course, Chiron, unlocking that potential. Like all of these things come into it. When I heard him say that, I'm like, oh, thank you. Because I sort of thought, oh, am I not a good enough astrologer? I can't tell you that you're just going to be policeman, tick. And, you know, and sometimes when I'm even reading someone's chart, I'm like, what the hell does this person do? Because they're this, or they've got a lot of power, or they've got a, and then they tell me, oh, I'm a friggin' lawyer, or I'm a this, or I'm a doctor. And I'm like, wow, like, you know, you can see parts, but when they tell you, but it could be anything, like any, you know, you could do anything with what you've got. It's about activating the chart and living it. And when I heard Stephen say that, I was just like, oh, that's good. You know, on the right path.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing as well, because I don't, like, yes, there is a branch of like predictive astrology, but I don't really believe that that is the way that astrology can best be used, you know. And I think that's sort of like what you said. It's not about looking at a chart and being like, you're going to be a policeman or a doctor or something like that, because yes, okay, on some subtle level that can be pieced together, but it's bigger than that. And I love what Stephen said about activating that. He's one of my all-time favorite astrologers. Same. Like his book Sky Mates 2, the composite book, holy shit, like that.
I don't have that.
You need to get that.
Yeah, well, because I ended up buying Robert
Hand,
Planets. Yes, Robert Hand's Planets in Composite, and that was good. But I sort of, once I did it, I was like, well, it was good. Don't get me wrong, because I love Robert Hand, and my Planets in Transit book is in 8 gazillion pieces. Like that is my all-time go-to book. But I ended up buying Planets in Houses from him, Planets in Composite, and I was given Planets in Transits like years and years, like I don't know, like 10 years ago or something. But the Planets in Houses was really different. I don't know if you've read it. It's like this real different sort of system, so it's a bit different. So I sort of picked it up and was a bit like, oh yeah, and I haven't picked it up again.
Read that book of his actually, because I think it is often out of print. His books can be like, some are really easy to get, and then others you kind of have to wait until there's that demand for it again. But I've never. Does he base it on? Is it like whole or equal or something? Or?
Well, I don't know if it's that or if it's Kosh or what it is, but it's weird. Like it's just strange how he talks about them. Look, again, I read it I looked at it at least a few years ago, and I sort of was a bit like, okay, I'm not there yet. That's cool. I'll pick it up again. But I do want I ended up buying Yesterday's Sky by Stephen Forrest that I've been working through, which is fabulous. And of course, Inner Sky and you know, Moving the Sky or whatever, but the Changing Sky. But I do not have that one, and I think that I really want that one. I love that you love the composite chart too. I really love that.
It's like my all-time favorite, like my go-to, I think, like, because even more than the Davison, the Davison doesn't really personally resonate with me.
I've never pulled it up, so I wouldn't even know.
Interesting. So the difference, I guess, is like a composite works literally on the midpoints between two people.
Yes.
But the Davison looks at the midpoint between your two birthdays.
So that would give an entirely different chart.
It actually gives you a chart that exists in time and space, because with composite, we know that it's not a chart that, you know, maybe by chance someone out there could have that, but it's not a time and space chart. But the Davison, like, you know, so between you and I, like, I'm February and are you May or April?
May.
So say our Davison sun would be, I don't know, it would probably give us a day like the 31st of March, for example.
Yeah, so Aries,
It would be 1 year, like the exact midpoint year between our two birthdays. So like, let's say the 31st of March, I don't know, 1985. And it would even give us a midpoint time, 9 p.m. So like there would be someone out there born with that exact chart, but that is like our merged energy in time and space. So I think it's really a cool concept, but I feel like it complicates it a bit too much. That's just my personal opinion. Like, I feel like the actual midpoints between your own actual charts is more accurate, I think
so. Well, it's your chart, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So, but then it's really interesting because people that read Davisons are like so passionate, like it has to be Davison. And I think this is something really interesting because, you know, within astrology, there is just so many branches and rabbit holes and tools within the broader scope. But I find it so interesting how people get so stuck on things that they actually become like very shut down. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like you said something like this earlier in our chat just regarding this sort of about like how, like there's just no sometimes room for movement between people, or people are very critical of how other people read astrology. You know, both of us are self-taught, really, for example. And that there can be like a lot of like, oh, well, you know, you didn't go to London School of Astrology, so like,
exactly,
who are you? And I think that that's such a like old paradigm.
And look, and it took me like literally, I only just started calling myself an astrologer 2 years ago. So that's how long it took me, because I felt that elitism of astrologers where I can give reverence for what they did. They can draw a chart up on maths and all that stuff. And yet we've got the access to the computer, which they love now. And I get that. So I have a lot of respect for old school astrology. I really do. And I just, again, I felt like, oh, you know, where do I fit in? And, you know, for me, it's so even hard to describe sometimes. Might have something to do with Neptune in my third house and friggin' Mercury and Gemini. But the thing is that I feel astrology, it's just this cosmic language for me that it clicks and I feel it. Like I literally, like I can't even describe it. Like it just is me. Like it is me. And I know you get that. Like it just is me, right? And I don't know if that's because we're self-taught. And and so it wasn't until, and I know I've probably shared this with you, but I'll share it as well. Like it wasn't until a few years ago where I've had professional astrologers who have been taught for 4 years come to me and ask me things. And I was like, you know, like, and they were like, look, the difference is that, you know, it is your passion and you do feel it and you see things differently than just a clinical astrologer. And when people come and do my training, I'm like, look, I'm not a clinical astrologer. I mean, astrologers even say, you know, you shouldn't use personal experience. And I'm like, unfortunately, I'm always going to use personal experience.
Yeah, right?
You know?
That's relatable for people. Like, it's not about being high and mighty and on this throne separated from your students. Like, it's about actually being on the front line with them and actually sharing stories of, you know, of joy or grief or fuck ups or
like or how you didn't like one sign for so long, and it's,
right?
you know, and it's your descendant, so get over it, motherfucker.
100%. Like, I was so conditioned. Like, my mom, like, so my mom's a Gemini, my dad's a Scorpio.
Here we go.
They're 100%, they are not together. They are not together.
Yeah.
But so my mom hates Scorpios as much as she hates red. She always tells everyone like red is like a horrible color. Like, so I grew up in a house where I was told like Scorpios are like the worst and like fuck the color red. And I was just like, okay. And so I kind of grew up with this thing about Scorpios of like, I don't know, there's something off about them, but I'm like, it's my dad. Like, I love him. So I had to really like break that down, because then I discovered I had Pluto in Scorpio, which is like the ultimate Scorpio placement. Like, you cannot be more Scorpio than a Pluto in Scorpio. Even though it's generational, it gives such a depth of character to the generation born with that placement. So I had to unpack a lot of shit with that. And it's in my 9th house. So it directs so much of my beliefs and understanding and really my astrology. So it's so funny how we have these conditions of certain signs. And I think taking on that, like that beginner level of students, so often the conversations are literally just breaking down those kind of stereotypes, because most people are conditioned to understand astrology from what they've read in the back of the newspaper. Bless Jonathan Caner. But like, that's how they discovered astrology. It's just sun sign astrology, which we know, is it really astrology? No.
It's not. There's this much room for it. Like, there's this much room. Like, I will read Lorna Bevan's sun sign astrology, most other sun sign, and you always need to read your sun and your ascendant. Like, that's the bottom line. You just have to do that, because you need to see what's happening in your chart. And interestingly enough, just backtracking two steps, is when the Sydney School of Astrology, I don't know if you follow them, but they're fabulous. They offer lots of great courses and things like that.
I did one term.
Did you?
Yeah. Like maybe almost 10 years ago now.
Oh, amazing. And, you know, the guy that runs it, I think he's a Virgo, like a triple Virgo or something. Like, he's awesome.
Mark, he's a great teacher.
Oh, no, not Mark. So there's another guy. No, but I do watch some of Mark's stuff. He's the sort of older guy, isn't he? But so there's another guy. I just can't remember his name. Anyway, he's amazing. But there was a bit of a thread going on, like, you know, what makes an astrologer, and not just aspects in the chart, which Linda Goodman has sort of pointed out. You know, there's been theses on what makes an astrologer, and there has to be some depth in the chart for the continuation and the evolving layers of astrology, because it never ends. And if you just want to like get to a point in astrology and then you think everything's okay, you won't be an astrologer, because that just doesn't happen. Like, it's infinite, right? And of course I have that and you have that. But you know, what makes an astrologer, there was this great thread, and then he came in and he goes, look, he blatantly said this. He goes, some of the most amazing astrologers I've ever met are self-taught. He goes, because they don't have the conditions, they don't have the terms, they don't have the like, it's not the logic, but it's different, you know. And I don't know. And again, I read this a few years ago. I breathed that sigh of relief and I went, I'm going to start teaching now, you know. And I stepped into that. And I mean, and that was at the ripe old age of what, like 36 or something. Like, that I finally did it and accepted that I can call myself that, you know, and be okay with it. So, you know, self-taught, we do come, I think, from a very different way. And I think that, like you said, with, you know, people will always hate a sign that they don't understand, or hurt them, right? So, you know, an ex, they always hate the ex, the Scorpio or the Taurus or whatever, right? But the thing is that then I love more so than anything when someone hates a sign and they've got like 6 planets in that sign. Like, it actually brings me joy,
right? I know, it's like, it's kind of subtle joy, for sure.
I'm not a sadist. Oh yeah. Okay, maybe I am a sadist. I do like some of my favorite movies, and it must be my stellium in the 8th house is animals eating people, and everyone always just cannot believe that. But I'm sorry, I love Rogue, and I love, you know, the Meg, as poxy as they are, huge animals just devouring people. It's great, you know.
For sure.
So I must admit, when when someone hates a sign so much, and it's their ascendant, or it's their moon, I'm just like, right, mate, you've got some fucking work to do right here with
because
this.
It's like, it's that repressed energy within us, you know. I think the most common one is actually what usually ends up being our descendant sign.
Mm.
Because it's what
That's my story.
Yeah, it's like it's what we're most seeking in another person, yet we tend to project out the shadow of that energy because it's that the mirror. So
exactly, we project it and then we repel it, and then we, you know what I mean, like we project it but then we repel it big time.
Absolutely. And I mean, my descendant's Virgo, so
Okay.
South Node's there, so you can imagine how nitpicky I get internally about that. I feel like my sun in the 12th house helps because I tend to keep it to myself, you know. I mean, maybe it's a bit too repressed, but like, yeah, and then I meet so many people. I feel like I've been on this like Virgo journey, to be honest, since my Saturn return. Like all these people started coming into my life with heavy Virgo placements, and we got along, like amazing connections, friendships, but then they really like fell apart with grace, I guess. But I realized it was really about, you know, understanding myself through those connections though. You know, I really had to like learn to like, okay, this person's really triggering me, and like I can be really 3D about it and be like, well, they did this and they pissed me off and they were an asshole, whatever bullshit we tell ourselves. But I was like, okay, but like where is that pushing within me, that like that discomfort is coming from my own inability to accept how I subconsciously often push that energy into my connections to create that mirror back of like that falling apart. So understanding our descendant sign is so important, and the ruler of that, because whatever the ruler of that descendant is, wherever he is hanging out in the chart, is going to be that channel or that space where those projections are coming out the most. So
and mine is the funniest motherfucking story ever, because Aries is Aries is my descendant.
Okay.
And so, but I've always had the idea, and you clarified this more when I did your astrology course last year with the semi-sextile, right? Like the sign you, and Katie explained it so well, and I explained it to my teachers. I said, this is what I was taught, and it's the best description, that we're on a street, I've got a neighbor that side, that neighbor's Aries, I'm the Taurus, and that neighbor's Gemini. We really don't have anything in common except for that we're neighbors. Like that's literally all we have in common. And when she said that, I was like, it's so fascinating, because I've always thought and wanted to do my own theory. And this is before I even knew aspects deeply. I was like, the sign either side of you, like they push your buttons, and there's all the elements of, they're a different modality, they're a different element, so they're so different to you, like they couldn't be more different. And then of course Aries is my descendant, and I've got Mercury in Gemini, but I'm a paradox, I'm a dickhead. But the Aries descendant, and I had, you know, my friend who's a professional astrologer, you know, I was telling her about this, and she's like, you know, and said exactly what you said, you know, that's your projections onto Aries, and it's a part of you that you suppress, like their maybe dominance or selfishness. Like you don't like that in them because you're not willing to go there or to stand up and say what you want or whatever it is. Have the courage, you know, those real Aryan qualities that I used to get irked by. And, you know, I've done a lot of work and I'm completely fine now. Like it's because I've done the healing. But the even funnier thing is that my Mars is in the 7th house, and it's just like, who even am I? I know, what an idiot. So good. So of course it's going to happen in relationships. Luckily it's in Taurus, it's not in Aries, but it's still in the 7th house, you know. So the ruler of my descendant is in my 7th house, which is at home. So you know, I mean, which is, you know, at home as in by house, right, in the chart. And it's like, shit, man. So I did that for so long, just did all that Aryan projecting and not being able to face it or integrate it. But then I also find the opposite sometimes true too, is that people will attract a lot of the descendant and actually really like them, but they're suppressing their ascendant, which is really fascinating as well. Whereas I attract my ascendant like crazy. Like I've got, you know, shitloads of Libra clients, like Librans everywhere. Whereas, you know, where I've seen it the other way around, where they really enjoy the descendant, but they haven't really mastered, they're descendant, but they haven't really mastered the ascendant, which is still how they come across anyway. So they're not getting away from that, but they're not connecting into it because it's like maybe a sign they don't like. So I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably more my experience. Like if I just think in terms of like people that have come into my life, for sure it's been much more like the descendant Virgo space than the Pisces ascendant space. But then I don't know, I feel like, but then I have so much Pisces, like it's actually it's a little bit too much. And it's all in my first house. So it's like I can't escape that Piscean nature that I have, because North Node Venus conjunct in the first house. But then that brings that Aries layer to me, right? You know, like
exactly.
my Venusian energy is actually quite direct because it's the first house. So even though Venus in Pisces is so soft and romantic, it's like, I know what I want and I want it now. And if you're not going to meet me there, then go fuck yourself. You know, it gets a bit like that if I'm mastering it.
And it's like you're romantic and you want that, but with balls, right? Like I'm romantic with balls.
Doesn't meet me with that. I'm just like, you know, and like my shadow self, like I guess we could say like my Lilith, right, gets really like, you know, I can't respect someone who doesn't come to me with balls. Like, and if you're just going to be really like weak or a coward about it, I can't connect. But so often I attract those kind of relationships.
What's your Mars?
Sagittarius 10th house. So it's kind of in a wide square with my Venus. It's not exact, but it's still felt. So then I have that own dis-ease within me, right? Like my own inner masculine and feminine is meeting in that square friction space. So of course I attract, you know, partners to me who don't really know what they want, because internally I'm like, one minute I want this and another minute I want that, and you know.
And I was just going to say, it's mutable, baby. It's all mutable. It's just this constant, I've got Mars and Sagittarius, which would be, you know, quite a dynamic guy that you're looking for. Like you want to attract a dynamic leader, you know, that Sagittarian philosopher, you know, that gypsy. But it's, you know, even whether it's a loose square or not, your Venus is immutable, your fucking Sag is immutable. Like there's just all this mutable energy. So there's this constant change for you. So then even when they are meeting you, you're like, I'll change that now. And just like, oh shit, I thought that we were good.
No, I do that. And that's what I'm really learning. I'm like, and that's the path. It's like when we come to a point where we are able to face our own stuff, like with compassion for ourselves, like not be,
absolutely
ourselves, and
no.
By sort of being like, okay, like I'm the one that's changing my mind, and they're just reflecting that to me, because like I might have a really great conversation with someone, and then the next day I wake up and I'm like, but then like 3 hours later, like we might talk again and I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then like 5 hours later, I'm like, but really, you know, and that's my shit, right? Like, girl, get your shit together. Like I want
so funny.
that connection. I have to be consistent with it. And with all of my mutable stuff, like I'm not the most consistent individual. And that's okay. It's part of my charm.
Yeah. And I think that sort of what you were saying too, I just wanted to say as well, like I was listening to the Leo King ages ago, and he just talked about when you are an astrologer, you actually need to be emotionally mature. So I don't know about you, but I have a lot of people go, I hate my chart. I hate that. I don't want that north node. Oh, this south node. And they whinge about their chart. I'm like, this there within the problem is if you can't like your chart, make it dynamic, activate it, live it, make it in motion. What does that say about how you feel about you and your life? So it's exactly what Katie's saying. Like, yes, this is happening and it's all her doing because of this square, and she's aware of it. And that's the wonderful thing about astrology, is it makes us aware of shit. But the thing is that we can't get so emotionally attached to it and attach all these stories. Oh, poor me, I've got moon square Pluto. Fucking yeah, I do. But it's okay. Yeah, we've both got a Hades moon, and it's just like, and it's okay. You know, the thing is that don't you want to know that? Like for me, it's empowering, but you do have to be emotionally mature. And that's sort of what the Leo King was saying. He said it so well too. He was like, you know, you need to be a good astrologer, and to be into astrology, you actually have to be emotionally detached and emotionally mature. Because the thing is that we're reading archetypes and we're playing out those archetypes. And whether you like it or not, they're happening. So you either sort of get with it and embrace it, and not be so, you know, emotionally attached to, oh, that's hard, or, oh, that's, you know, like everyone's got some sort of difficult placement. But to be honest, sometimes I find like charts that are so full of trines and all that stuff, and just like, oh, so boring, you know?
I know,
like,
right? That's
where's some spice?
Exactly. I love that. Where's the spice? Exactly. Because I love squares. I really, I have a lot of them. And so I've learned to love them. But I do, I see it, even if we talk synastry here, you know, I find that, you know, when I have a lot of squares and oppositions with someone, it's so dynamic, and it's, you know, like we push each other's buttons. And I think one thing to be conscious of though with that is, if you are meeting someone a lot with these kind of squares, oppositions, inconjuncts, you do need to be mindful of trauma bonding. That's something I've learned too, because as dynamic as it is and as passionate, there is a tendency to be meeting each other in places that feel safe, but only feel safe because it's like a trauma that you've experienced earlier, so it's a learned behavior. So there is two kind of parts to that. But in saying that, like when I've had connections with people where it's very, you know, sextiles and trines everywhere, like it's beautiful. But being such a square heavy person myself, I get bored of it. And like it probably sounds like not a nice, like it's a bit harsh, but it's like I just need more spark. And I find that, like, yes, sextiles and trines on paper are beautiful, but sometimes it can leave us yearning for more. And I think that squares, when looked at from the right consciousness or perspective, can really offer that. But there's for sure a journey and process between the two individuals to work on their own shit. Like, you cannot be in a square dynamic with an individual if both people aren't consciously working on themselves. And it's not about being spiritual or anything like that. It's just like, this is triggering me, and it's about communicating with each other. Because so often with these squares, like, both people freak out and then they don't communicate, and then that's when it really just kind of falls to shit. But yeah, I think that the square is, it's overlooked a lot in synastry, I think, because people yeah. Oh, I was like, are you
I was going to let you keep going.
And that was the end.
Well, and what I've, you know, an analogy I love about a square, and from another one of my favorite astrologers, which is Michael Lennox, is that I'm pretty sure it was Michael Lennox. Anyway, you listen to so much, you can't be sure. Should be sure. But you know, a square is, you can't, you know, a square is a right angle, and you can't build a house without walls, which means wall and floor. So you need right angles for some sort of structure, like inner structure. Like, I don't have heaps and heaps of squares, but I do have a few squares, and you know, there needs to be that inner structure. But then I think that when you're looking synastry too, and there can be those unhealthy bonds around all the squares and oppositions, you want to then look for, you know, you still need, I believe, you know, some real raw commonality too, and some of these real sort of pivotal. I mean, I was listening to, I don't know if it was Lynn Bell, I was listening to someone talk all about the elements, and she's like, look, I can look at any two charts and think anyone can overcome anything. And Linda Goodman says it. She's like, love can overcome karma. So I absolutely, and love can conquer karma, or something, she says. And I do believe that. I just also believe that, you know, there are some special spots of, you know, nodal aspects, and even just having the same sun, like element in sun or Mercury, and just having something. So you don't just want a full relationship of squares, because that's probably just not great. You know, there has to be something magical or dynamic or past life, or, you know, moon conjunct ascendant, which is beautiful. Like those little things in synastry that form an etheric bond to each other that can't even be spoken. So then you can navigate those squares, hopefully not 50,000, but a few squares and a few oppositions together. You know, there's more of a navigation, because there is something energetic and etheric that really binds you. But if there's none of that and only squares, I mean, ouch, maybe a bit ouchy.
Like I said, that's textbook trauma bonding, you know, because you're literally hooking into each other energetically or etherically, like you said, with these really tense wounds and hooks. It's like, you know, if you've had this, you know, maybe you have, like, let's just keep it really generic, but like you have like a father wound, right? Then, you know, you tend to attract relationships in your life that reflect that dynamic back to you. So that often comes through like sun square moon or sun square Pluto, or these type of dynamics. And it can be really healing for you because it's helping you work through that. But so often these relationships become all consuming, that when we're unable to see the lessons or the benefits of it when we're in it, it just becomes incredibly toxic. And that's the patterns that can be really challenging to break out of. And it's how people get stuck in these dynamics for like years and years. You know, it's because squares are hard to break because it is so foundational, like you said. You know, once that wall is up, once there's that connection, and it's that etheric bond as well as the physical, you know, even if we separate from someone, I feel like what can be the most challenging is like that cord cutting on an etheric level. And that's when we need to start working more with energetics. You know, that's where astrology can really like flow so well with energy work, I think, because the astrology shows us these ties that bind. But if we're able to kind of consciously work from that healing space, we're able to start releasing that on an etheric level to not allow these connections to sort of carry over and carry over. Like if you're consciously able to break that nodal connection, for example, and like not like, you know, physically, but like, you know, it doesn't mean that you completely have to remove someone from your life, but if you are able to be conscious of that contract and consciously remove yourself from it, of course, from a space of openness and love, but choosing and empowering yourself not to carry this trauma bonding through the ages eternally, because that is what is so heavy about these connections. We bring in all of these experiences from every other realm and dimension. Of course, two individuals then face each other in the flesh and go, fuck me, like I can't deal with this, and we just run. We feel like we want to be in this connection more than anything with this individual, but like how can we do that with these ties that bind in such a heavy karmic way? It's big stuff. It's big stuff.
Yeah,
But it's my favorite kind of astrology to unpack.
Oh, yeah, I love synastry too. And I mean, and a big love of my synastry love is because I've been with my husband for nearly 20 years. And so what we have is just such this, you know, formation, and it's all not perfect. And it's, you know, there's stuff there. I mean, I laugh at the fact that he's got like Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter all in his third house, and he's facts and black and white. Oh, this is how it is. And I've got Neptune there. I'm like, oh, I just base everything on feelings, and he just wants to kill me. He's got Mercury in Capricorn, for fuck's sake. I've got it in Gemini plus Neptune in my third house. So it's, but I was listening the other day to an astrologer on YouTube, and he described Black Moon Lilith in the first house very, very, very well. And the thing that I took away from it the most is the fact that Black Moon Lilith is visceral. So it's a feeling. And being in the first house, he said, was that you actually trust your body more than you trust anything else, government, society, people. And I'm like, oh, someone sees me, because I've always just sort of thought about it as Neptune in the third, right? Like, you know, I feel things. I don't necessarily think things, I feel things. But then when he unpacked this little video around, you probably know him, I can't remember his name, but I'll tell you later. But it was really fabulous. I don't know, it was just like I was really seen in that moment, because when everyone thinks, and that's where I feel like such an outcast with Black Moon Lilith in my first, because no one gets that I just feel something, and I'm like, no, I don't need to research it. I don't need science. I don't need any of those things. They don't differ. Even if they're right, I still feel something, and that is held very strongly in my body. And because the first house is the physical body as well, when he described it, I was just like, that is very accurate. And, you know, I feel Black Moon Lilith can be a touch indescribable, to be honest, when you're trying to interpret her. It's much more of a feeling, and I've always felt that. And then even just the way he shared about that Black Moon Lilith in the first, I was like, someone sees me, and that has made me unpopular. That makes me the witch, or that makes me, oh, you're weird. Like, this is science says this. So you can imagine, you know, my husband's got Saturn, Pluto conjunct, and Jupiter in the third, right? And then Mercury in Capricorn. You know, he's got all bottom house planets. I've got all top house planets. So, you know, we are perfect, you know, like he's amazing. But I just understand this shit. So when I see it coming out, I'm like, it's okay. I accept that in you. And this is just me. You know, this is just me. It's just how I roll, right? Like, I just don't give any value of those things. And I've got Uranus in my second house. So my value system, again, totally different to most people's value system. So to have that little combination of those three houses, they're the only three houses. My first, Pluto and Black Moon Lilith, second, Uranus, and third, Neptune, are the only three houses with the planet on the bottom of my chart. So they're very, you know, it's first, second, and third, isn't it? Like, you know, it's everyday stuff, right? And it's just amazing to understand these things, and you keep, and no matter what, and this is the cool thing about astrology, there are more layers and you're revealed more things as time goes on. And I mean, and even when me and Katie are like messaging and I sort of say something about her chart, which of course she knows, but then I'll just say something different. She's like, oh yeah, like, thanks for saying that. Like, I didn't think of that, because when we're in it, when we're in our charts, sometimes it's difficult, or we're not seeing maybe more of a positive light, because I'm an astrologer through the lens of my own chart, just like you're an astrologer through the lens of your own chart. We've got different charts, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to interpret astrology differently. And I think that goes on to what you were saying earlier, is when astrologers are so finicky and critical of one house or of one this. And even when I teach, look, I am Placidus all the way. Whole houses don't work for me. I've looked at them in so many charts, and people I know, so not a stranger, people I know, so I can see how it unfolds, and it just doesn't work for me. But I tell everyone, like, go and discover it, go and play with it. It might work for you. You know, I've had some of my clients go and start doing shamanic astrology and whole house astrology, and you know, so they sort of come to me and go, no, it's in the 6th house now, not the 5th, or whatever, you know. And I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I would still read it like that, but that's cool. Like, you've got to, I'm not so rigid to go, no, there's only one way, you know. But I don't look at anything past those few things. So I'm not looking at draconic and blah and Kosh and blah, blah. I'm just like, look, to me, it's whole house or Placidus, and that's it. They're the charts I'm looking at. And tropical, because I live in Australia and the globe. Like, that's why I want to base it on, you know, equinoxes and solstices. That just makes sense to me. So I don't go down the Vedic, or I don't do any of those things. Not saying they're wrong, but it's just not something I've gone into. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, that's something really important, is like working with the tool that actually works best within the geography that you find yourself. Like, I feel like in Australia, so often we use Placidus, and I've been to 2 astrology schools just for a term each, so not super long term, but like both these different schools taught Placidus, and it works best in that location because of where we're placed in the world. It gives us fairly even houses naturally, you know, but the further north you move, of course, the wider the orbs become. So like, now living in Europe, I do find that even if I'm doing a chart for someone here in Portugal, it starts to warp that Placidus a little bit. And so I've started playing around a little bit more with the other types of charts, only just to make sure that what I'm drawing up in Placidus is going to resonate and connect. But, you know, sometimes I have clients that are like, you know, in the Netherlands and things like that, and I can't,
and it's literally like 3 houses in this much of their chart with all these. It's hilarious to look at. Like, it's
you can't use Placidus in that. I mean, you can still, but like it's not gonna give that person enough clarity to work with. As astrologers, we can still see it and make sense of it, but to present that to a client, it's not really gonna have that resonance. But I say that to my students as well, as I play around with it. Like, the only way I learned things was by changing things. Like, go on astrology, like on astro.com, like, you can't break it. Like, just keep choosing different things, playing around with it, and adding extra, you know, additional objects, and seeing how those resonate with you, and playing around with it.
Exactly.
I love that you said, like, you don't fuck with draconic charts, because I've started fucking with draconic charts. And I find them really interesting. I'm still learning about it, like, surely no expert. But so they say that it's like your soul's chart, and that it's it's like, we come into this lifetime and we put on like the human experience, i.e. we take our first breath, and that gives us like the flow of the chart in this lifetime. But by looking at the draconic, it shows like who you were before that breath was taken. And for a lot of people,
fascinating.
And I've played around with it a bit, and it changes people's charts like quite significantly sometimes. Don't quote me, because I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think it does it I think it just starts the chart by 0 point Aries.
Okay.
I could be mixing it with something else though. But anyway, when I did mine, nothing changes. The only thing that shifted was one of my Jupiter moved to 0 degrees Taurus, but otherwise my chart, all the houses, everything stayed the same. I don't know what that means. I'm still exploring it, but I found it fascinating, because what I'd been taught about it was how different the chart was going to be. And when I looked at my own, I was like, it's the same. So, I mean, in one way, I think that can be great because it shows maybe in this lifetime I'm really working in unison with that soul level. But then maybe it shows I can get stuck. Maybe I'm too stuck in karmic patterns, and this lifetime has layered on a lot of stuff that I've been resisting working through on every other dimension and layer. So there's so many different ways to look at it. But it's such
very cool.
Such a super nerdy chart. Like,
well, it makes me now, when we get off, I'm going to go and have a look at mine.
Go look, because I mean, it's interesting, but it's hard to find information about it. Or like reputable information. And I think speaking of that, because we sort of started on a tangent at the beginning of books, one thing I always tell my students is like, astrology books are so like imperative for your learning. Like, you can't learn everything with astrology on the internet, even though like I teach on the internet, but like there's so much bullshit out there because anyone can put stuff out there. And I just think that especially the astrologers that were writing a lot of stuff in the 70s and 80s, like that hasn't really gone out of date. Like, that is where you need to be exploring and delving into. Like, we started with Robert Hand. Like, even if some parts of what he teaches don't resonate, he laid the foundation for so much of what we practice as modern astrology. Or, you know, I mean, I call myself 5D astrology, but I hate labels. But for me, it just gives me, it shows the space that I'm taking people into through the transpersonal work that I do, which is like a whole other tangent. But
a good tangent.
It is a good tangent, but we'd need a few more hours if I start banging on about that. But yeah, I really think that like actually physically buying the books is so important, because you can't just learn something off like astro.blogspot. Like, no. And this is where it gets into the realm of like, you know, I don't believe that astrology needs more rules and regulations, because as self-taught, it's allowed us the space to really delve into this world for ourselves. But like, I question sometimes, like, someone coming into astrology, maybe they're finding it on like Instagram, or they just stumble across a blog. Like, people are thirsty for this information, but I think what often happens is when they start to explore this themselves through curiosity, which is amazing, you know, how often are they running into information that isn't, it's not even about being accurate, but it's like,
there's no substance, actually. There's no substance. It's not actually teaching them anything. It's giving them, you are this, these are your traits, oh, this is happening. It's giving you those things, but the teaching side of things, you know, I have so many people that come to my astrology courses and go, oh yeah, I know a lot about astrology. They don't. They literally don't. Like, they leave it going, oh my God, like, after just even knowing about the elements and the modality, like they didn't even know that. So that's the thing, like, when you can strip all the white noise that's out at the moment, because astrology just has become hip again, which, you know, I'm sure you agree, like, it's great. Like, we want everyone to be astrologers. Like, we want you guys to know your own chart. Like, my thing is self first. My biggest thing is that you know this much of yourself, but then you want to go and tell everyone about them. It's like, it's actually dangerous. Like, you can't go and read someone's chart without substantial studying and knowledge, and like, give yourself a decade. Like, that's what I say to people. Give yourself a decade of really doing it. And that's going to weed out the people that just want the fun stuff, the quick stuff. Let's just label everything, as opposed to let's go deep into this and understand my own chart. I say to my course participants, if you can't tell me every degree of your planet, every planet in what house, if you can't tell me that just off the top of your head, you don't know your chart well enough. Simple as that. And I know it might sound, again, harsh, and me and you have a very similar outlook on this. So everyone, are you loving it?
It's tough love. It's tough love.
It is tough love.
But
because it's because we're so passionate, and we've taken decades upon decades upon decades of doing, you know, even when people come to me and say, what books do you suggest? I'm like, any book. just buy astrology books. I honestly can't even begin to start. Like I can look at my shelf and go, yeah, I could read out 58 million names, but what's the point? Like it's not about I say old books, old astrologers, even just going back to basics with, Linda Goodman and stuff. Like you want to understand all this stuff, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because I think that's the thing. People maybe learn like their sun, moon, and ascendant. Amazing. Great foundation. But that knowing that isn't enough for you to go out there and give readings. And I think this is what kind of grinds my gears a bit, because there's so many people that are unfortunately getting like drawn into, like totally drawn off their path, I think, by individuals who maybe they mean well, but they're not at a space of maturity yet, astrological maturity, to be holding people's hands through their own traumas and their own experiences. Like you as an astrologer are also like, it's like being a cosmic therapist. Like I even encourage like people, like students of mine that really start to delve into this, I'm like, doing a counseling course or something even is really important with this, if that resonates and you're able to, because it gives you those tools to be able to hold space for people. I have counselors that I really respect and know and have even maybe worked with in the past. Like I give them as contacts to my clients. Like if I have a client that comes to me in an incredibly low space, yes, I can show them astrologically where they are at and what is causing this, but like I don't feel comfortable leaving that session with them without giving them the tools psychologically, if they need it, to carry on. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are saying like, come and have a reading with me and I'll tell you XYZ, and it's like they're just leaving people with this so much information and then just kind of leaving them be. And I think that can be really dangerous as well. And this is why people have such strong misconceptions about the work we do, because they then think that we're just like charlatans or full of bullshit and stuff. And it's so much deeper than that if you're working with someone who truly knows the art and the language of astrology.
Yeah, and astrology and psychology go so well together. I see a psychologist. Like I don't see a psychic, I don't see energy workers, I see a psychologist. I know myself so well astrologically that psychology adds so much depth to that. And when I have people go, oh, all this is going wrong in my life, like what's happening in my chart, I'm like, you need actual help. Like this is beyond your astrology. Like, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm an asshole, but the thing is that it's not about just going, oh, because the moon's here, this is why this is going on. Or because Pluto's fucking squaring my Pluto, this is why it's been 3 years of shit. No, the thing is that if you're awake and conscious and doing the work and mastering your chart, like, it's that, so, the thing that we always say is that the planets are neutral. They're never doing anything to you. But if there is shit that you are hiding, that you are suppressing, that you're not dealing with, if you are still in the marriage that you should have left a decade ago, it's got nothing to do with your chart, darling. It's got to do with you needing to leave the marriage. It's got nothing to do with your chart. And you can keep sort of wanting that to be an answer and that to be an excuse, but that's not what astrology is used for. It's not here to fix you or to give you something to latch onto or to blame for what's going on in your life. Yet that's so often what so many do. And it's sad, because then astrology again gets that rap and it's like, well, blah, blah, blah. And people jumping on all the bandwagons and stuff like that. It's like, no. And I mean, I think one of the greatest things I've ever heard is when I'm doing my job right and my clients doing their job right, like an astrology reading is just like, I've been calling them astrology activations. Like my clients this year have been going, this is an activation. This is lighting my cells up. And I'm like, I'm just helping you to remember who you are. Like, that's all I'm doing. I'm just reading you back to you. Like, that's all I'm doing. We're magicians. We're alchemists. I mean, I've got Chiron exactly conjunct my sun. So I am a motherfucking maverick. And I know that. But the thing is that I'm just helping you to remember and recall things which you've already had drop in if you're doing the work. And it's only those few people that go, I don't resonate with anything. And I'm like, okay, a chart never lies. So So you're either got your date wrong and time wrong, or not your date, your time wrong. That's the only way it could really be way off, or you're just a very asleep person and not activated at all whatsoever in your chart. So that to me, a chart never lies. Like it is it for me. So yes, I can, like you said, yes, we can see what's going on. And yes, like that transit can be a little bit tricky. Yes, having Saturn go over your sun a few times, not going to be a walk in the park, right? You're going to have to deal with some fucking lessons and some karma. But the thing is that if you were actually doing the work and dealing with it, it's actually okay. You know, it will be okay. But if it's been decades of the same thing, you need psychological help to help you to unlayer what psychologists do, which isn't my training. No. I'm not a psychologist, you know. So, you know, sometimes I just feel like people put all their eggs into one basket, like an energy healer or a psychic or even an astrologer. Like, you know, they'll be able to fix it or heal it or tell me what's wrong. But it's like, for some people, it's actually, the more energy healers you see, the worse you get. You actually need to stay away from those people and go and actually do the real work. And my psychologist said it to me years ago. She's like, it's funny, Tiarnie. She's like, people will go and do Reiki, and again, she's not dissing any of it. And you said this in your course last year, and it was like, you can go and pull the angel cards, you can go to do the Reiki, and you can go and have someone drum and activate you and do all those things. And then my psychologist said, but when you're ready for the real work, you'll see a psychologist. And I'm like, and an astrologer, because, you know, astrology can really, really help you to, astrology can fast pace. And that's what Stephen Forrest says, right? He says that psychology can take a lot of time, and it's very necessary sometimes to get to some dark places of the inner child stuff and do those things with a trained psychologist. But astrology can fast pace a few things, because all of a sudden, like, we're reading your wound back to you, we're reading Chiron, and you're like, fuck, oh, no wonder relationships are a thing. I've got Chiron in my friggin' 7th house conjunct Uranus. What a joy. It doesn't have to be the worst thing ever, but at least it brings your awareness to it, to go, that's why I'm X, Y, and Z. Now I can breathe a sigh of relief. You know, that's what I love hearing, is when I've read someone's chart, they're like, I feel like I can just be myself now. And I'm like, hallelujah. Like, that's what I want to do for you, is just help you to remember who you are so you can show up and be that.
Exactly. And I think the thing with astrology and about it taking time as well is just that, because there's so many layers to explore and unpack with every single planetary archetype that you have. Like, I remember, you know, a friend of mine, when I was so excited, like, I gave her like my astrology for the soul book on the nodes. And
love that book. Everyone reads that book.
Yeah. And I'm like, essential reading. Yes. And, you know, a few weeks later, I was like, so, like, what did you think about your node and all this stuff? She's like, I can't go there. Like, it's really heavy, and like, she just wasn't ready to face it, which is totally fine. So I think that it's important to take your time working through these placements that you have, because things like the nodes or like Chiron go so deep that when someone like you or I activates that knowledge in somebody, if they just go along their merry way and don't actually take the time to integrate that, they're not really understanding that part of themselves. So I think, like, this is why, like, 10 years, you know, before you are out there doing things, it doesn't mean you can't read charts,
like your family and friends, and absolutely.
Be a good astrologer, you have to be able to read charts. That's the thing too. Like, you can't be writing posts on Instagram like the full moon in Libra, blah blah blah, if you can't then sit down and any individual that sits in front of you read their chart. Like, you're not an astrologer if you can't read charts, right? And
that's and that is exactly, I say that everyone's on the bandwagon, this eclipse, this, and I always want to go, so where's it transiting in your chart exactly? Like, where is this full moon that you're talking about even happening in your chart? Because it's very easy to tack on to all of actual astrologers maybe talking about stuff, or other people talking about, this full moon energy, it's crazy. What if it's like making the most beautiful trine to your Libra? I mean, your Venus, or your moon. Like, no, this full moon should be making you feel great, but you're actually attaching on to a collective illusion that people don't actually know, because you're jumping on a weird bandwagon of things that you don't know anything about, because you couldn't even with accuracy share it in your own chart. Like, you don't know where that moon is in your own chart, but you're banging on about an eclipse. And it is, and this is hard truth, but this is what I've been saying for a long time too. And I say it in all of my classes to people. Like, I tell them, after this 6 weeks, don't go and read charts.
No,
Have
my
fun with your
God.
family and friends and children and stuff. And you know, the best thing I still do now is astrology is experiential. So that's what I said, I'm not experiencing your chart. So I can interpret some things, but I want to hear you. So I ask a shitload of questions. So how does that aspect happen for you? Or how did that transit happen? Or how did this happen? Or how does this happen for you? Because I don't know. What you're giving me is more information for my brain to, like, oh, someone had this experience. And, you know, I've found moon in the 12th house, for example, can be either like that really you know, hidden mother, like no attachment to the mother at all, like very hidden, you know, a loss of emotional connection. Or I've seen people the other way, like who are like telepathic with their mother. So, and really close, yet the 12th house would very much surmise, the moon being there, that there's that detachment and the mother's hidden. Yet I know some people that have displayed, you know, full telepathic communication, that they're that aligned with their mother. And whether that's healthy or not, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I'm just remembering this from ages ago. But the thing is that it's just this constant layering. And until you know your own chart, I'm like, until you know your own chart with absolute accuracy, and guess what? We still learn things about our chart. Like, I just learned something the other day about Black Moon Lilith in my first house, you know, and it lit me up like crazy, because you'll constantly be revealed different things through different astrologers' lenses and what they're really good at, like what, you know, certain astrologers, that's what they do. They say, I'm not a Black Moon Lilith expert. I mean, Katie is very good at Black Moon Lilith. I'm still like gathering. I've got a few books that I've just bought, so I'm still doing the stuff, you know, doing the thing. I just feel her because she is quite strong in my chart. So I sort of feel like I know her, but to go and just teach her, I can chat about her and sort of, you know, like put a little bit of, you know, a feeling when and if I bring that up in someone's chart. But I often don't, unless it's like exactly conjunct something. And then sometimes that's when I'm calling this one. I'm like, okay, so this chick's got it exactly conjunct this. Like, what do you think of that? And then we just talk for ages, because it's not on Google, my friends. It's not on Google. And sometimes it's not even the books that you have. You've actually got to apply the basics, which is understanding the sign and the archetype, and then understanding the house really deeply, understanding the planet that it's next to as well. Like, you start to understand these things like second nature. And whilst a lot of astrologers want to talk about all the fandangle stuff, getting back to basics is really where it's at. Like, that's what you want to be sharing, like putting the simple sentences together, like bringing it back to simplicity. I find when, you know, my clients or students are really like overwhelmed, I'm like, get out of your head now. Don't try and think about it. Don't try and sort it out. I can't teach people to feel it like I do, but I also don't want them to be overcomplicated in their head trying to analyze the shit out of stuff, because some astrology just can't be thought. It has to be felt. And when you feel it and experience it, you'll know. You'll understand that transit, or you'll understand that placement in your house when you feel it. But until then, don't try and overwork it. Don't try and sit in your mind and try and decipher it, or the book doesn't do this, or my notes don't help you, or even mine. Sometimes, I mean, and I actually feel sometimes me and you are sort of similar. Sometimes when we're describing something, we're like, okay, I hope that made sense, because I just, like, I'm feeling it and I'm trying to describe it to you.
We channel. And I think that's actually the sign of a good astrologer, is an ability to apply what you've learned, to take those book smarts, connect to your own inner knowing and intuitive self, and then you are in a space to actually bring forth like the merge between the higher self and the physical self and the knowledge.
Love that.
And so sometimes we will say things that differ to the old school
book.
astrology, or exactly. But I think that's the beauty of it, because how else will astrology to continue to evolve? Like, I feel like astrology got a bit stuck because people got in their egos about it, and that's okay. Like, we all have it, and we all do it at some point in time. But like, every astrologer has a unique voice to bring to the table. What you need to remember, though, is that astrologer is sharing what they know through their own channel or their own voice. So it's okay if something doesn't resonate with you, right? Because everyone has their own filter. And I think that's what's important to remember with any kind of spiritual teaching, is that it's always come from somewhere. But no matter how esoteric or how high up it's come from, the source of information, it's still being channeled through a very physical person who makes very physical decisions and mistakes and things like that. So it's always
I
going
always
to
say that
happen.
it's tainted. Everything's
So,
tainted.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you need to learn then as an astrology student to decipher that
Mm.
kind of taintedness. Is that a word? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Cool.
It is now.
It is, exactly. So yeah, like figure out, like, and the only way you can sometimes figure that out is through your own feeling, your own inner knowing. Like that is your guide and compass through the journey of astrology.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good tangent, love. Good
So
tangent.
good. So good. We just could go down the rabbit hole for years,
Oh,
couldn't
we
we?
really could. I know. And I
We
mean, like
could.
my thinking with this before we got started was like, yeah, like we're going to talk about like what's going on now. And I love
Yeah.
that we actually haven't at all, because I think there's
I know.
actually such a, like, everyone has an opinion and that's great,
Mm.
but like
Mm.
I think maybe I feel like where we've gone today is absolutely perfect. Like,
Yeah.
so one thing I do, I'm going to ask you one question though.
Okay.
I want to know your thoughts on the Uranus in Taurus transit,
Mm.
because I feel like everyone's talking about Saturn conjunct Pluto, and
Mm.
yes, that is huge, but I think that that kind of transit is so big, it can't be applied to a day-to-day basis yet. It's very
Mm.
much going to be a hindsight type transit.
Mm.
But Uranus in Taurus being a 7-year transit, I think, I mean, is it there till 2026?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
2026. Yeah.
So I just feel like, because, you know, Uranus rules astrology. It is
Yes.
the planet
Which
that
is
directs
so
that.
rad.
Yeah. And I think that being in an earth sign, being in the first sign, I truly believe, and this is my own filter, but that Uranus in Taurus transit is actually what is carving out the path of this new earth that we are moving into.
Hell yes.
So thoughts, opinions around?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that when Uranus moved into Taurus, and there was a lot of earth movement going on when she did. I say she just because Taurus to me is she.
Yep.
When he moved into Pachamama, Taurus, I mean Taurus, the most earthiest of the earth signs in my opinion, because she's fixed, and I feel like she literally is the core of the earth, Taurus.
Yep.
Whereas Virgo's more the mind earth, and then Capricorn's more the leading earth. That's just how I see them, just both based on their modalities. But I just knew that this was going to be an epic global wake up, where astrology becomes the new language, like the future language, like just
Yep.
boom. Like I was just like, yes, the planet of astrology being in grounded Taurus, like coming home, come to the earth, understand the cosmic. And I mean, I know that, what Uranus is in fall in Taurus, right? Like it doesn't want to be there. I mean, I've got
Yep.
Uranus exalted in Scorpio, so I'm going to be having my Uranus opposition coming up, which, as well as it hitting my Mars, hitting my Chiron, hitting my Sun, hitting my Venus, it's
Good.
fun times. Yeah.
Be great years.
Yeah, it's very exciting actually. I mean, I couldn't be more excited for me too, though. There's this element of Taurus being a very physical, so on an individual, if I just talk individually for a moment, Uranus in Taurus is, waking our energetic system up. So working with higher energies and a lot more subtle energies. I literally can feel electric pulses go through my physical body. Like it's very, very unbelievable. Like that's what I'm feeling on a physical. The physical upgrades are going to be quite huge, because, we're actually sort of revolutionizing our own DNA, our own cellular structure. We're revolutionizing that with Uranus changing it up. But on the global, I mean, a lot of this sort of financial stuff, economic stuff, it was always going to happen with,
Exactly.
with Uranus shaking up Taurus, the sign of the economy and money. And I think I read somewhere that the last time Uranus was sort of in Taurus was that the Great Depression. So again, around money, right?
I think it was just coming out of the Great Depression, so it was like
Okay, yeah,
1930s. So
it was, yeah,
right on that cusp point. So again, this is the thing with astrology about cycles, is when you start to look at the collective astrology, like look at a transit and look what it was doing 7 years ago, 30 years ago, 200 years ago, if we're talking Pluto. This is where we start to see that spiral that we move through, of where we're taken into a repeated place, but with a higher level of consciousness through the natural development of time and technologies and just human awareness, where we have to kind of learn our lessons. So right now we are in a space of like between Saturn and Pluto conjunct in the sign of Capricorn, and like, you know, capitalism and patriarchy, and reaching this like final frontier of how far can this cycle be pushed. I think Uranus in Taurus coming through is really going to, because Uranus, for those that are more beginners, like Uranus is the planet of shock, sudden change, sudden insights. So coming through in the sign that rules money, finances, physical things, like your home. I know that Cancer in the 4th house is more the home, but it has to be built in Taurus first. You can't just have a home. It doesn't just appear, you know. So it's actually, I feel like it's such a beautiful transit by looking at where it is in your own chart. It's like becoming an architect of that channel or that house, and using that Uranian energy, like being more aware of like channeling and what is changing in your body, like you said, and, you know, delving into more alternative pathways, not in terms of like being some like way out like conspiracy theorist. I don't mean alternative in that sense, but just like being more open to different thought forms, like, because that's triggering for Taurus, right? Taurus likes things to be how they are, and then Uranus comes in and it's like, well, everything you think you know, like, you don't, and we're about to flip that table on you. So by looking at where it is in your own chart by house, that shows you where you are having like a lot of structures falling down in some shape or form. There has to be a collapse in order for a true firmer foundation to carry you through into this new earth. And I think because that then sextiles with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, again, it doesn't, people instantly think like, oh my God, it's scary and negative, but like Capricorn and Taurus trine, sorry, not sextile. So these energies are actually working together in a positive way if you are able to look beyond what you think you're losing, which in fact that loss is going to create the space for what you truly desire. You just have to move through that process and not push yourself or try to force yourself beyond your capabilities, because Taurus is all about your capabilities, like what you can physically do with what you have. So I think working with those
and I think that there's also a real element of like changing your value system. Like what do you value that needs to be changed? And also when he is revolutionizing your life, I mean, there's also this element of, like, I love how you said, you know, it's like the architect, like he's changing, you know, the structure of that particular house. And especially, you know, to be honest, I think this is the best time for Taurians to be alive, because, you know, we won't get Uranus in Taurus again for 84 more years, and by then we will probably be dead. So, you know, being our age is pretty cool to be experiencing this, you know, like this is a cool transit for us to experience mid-30s or wherever, you know, you are as a Taurus. Like you could be any age, but like if you're, I just think that, you know, this sort of my generation, like it's exciting because there's so much transformation happening. And I think that it's actually also about like, you know, Uranus is freedom, is liberation. And where do you constrain yourself? And I know it's easy for Taurus to do, but the funny thing is that I've embraced, you know, I know that my life will look so different in 2026 from now, because it already has since, and he's only at 5 degrees, like, you know, it's just like, oh my God. And so, and I'm embracing that. And I think that's because I've got, you know, my Mercury's in Gemini, so I've got a very open mind. I'm actually quite mentally adaptable and flexible. Like I would, you know, having maybe Taurus in Mercury would be a bit too like, you know, and all these like Aquarians and Leos and Scorpios, I mean, they're going through their own thing with this transit. Like it, you know, a lot, you know, as much as a conjunction is like, I don't actually think it's a hard aspect at all. I love a conjunction. A conjunction for me is dynamic and change. But I also think think that it's like, where do you hold yourself in old patterns? And that's what he wants you to break free from. So on some level, it's like, what is the prison you're in, and where can you break free from the shackles to become liberated in your own life and be who you really are? Because there's an element of Taurians, if you know Taurians well, is we sort of live by our own rules. You know, we sort of do our own thing, and we're not confined by a lot of things, despite being that fixed sign. I get that, but there's also this, like, we're our own, we feel like Mama Earth, like we hold her well, we hold ourselves well, we're resilient, we get along on our own quite well. And depending on your own placements, if you're a Taurus sun, like, it might not be as easy for other people as I feel like it's going to be for me, but that's because I've got Pluto on my first two, so I embrace change and, bring it on, transformation, let's fucking do this shit, I'm excited about Uranus opposition, to be honest. So, because where can I be more free? Like, I live a free and liberated life. I don't feel inhibited in who I am. And that's where these cycles, especially from our late 30s through to that Uranus opposition, these midlife crisis cycles from Pluto square, I think there's like a Neptune thing going on there. Maybe you're better at that. I forgot what it was. I think there's a Pluto square, there's a Neptune, you've got your Uranus opposition. There's a few big transits, right?
Really between like 37 with the nodal return, I believe.
Yep. Nodal return at
44 to 45.
44. Yeah.
Everything is being activated, because all of the Uranus stuff that starts kicking off in your early 40s is what was always considered like the official Kundalini.
Midlife. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Which I mean, midlife, right? Because
midlife crisis. Yeah.
But so often now, because we're progressing forward in this Uranian age, because we are starting to begin the shift into the Aquarian age. We're not there yet. I need to be so clear on that. I banged on about it yesterday in my private group, but like, there's so much misinformation of like, people were saying that the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that's happening this week is the official age of Aquarius. I'm like, where the fuck are you making this shit up, bro? Like,
they're in Capricorn.
Yeah, right?
I think really, and look, I think that when Saturn and Jupiter move into, they have their great conjunction in Aquarius, that's in December. That's a nice little point.
Yeah.
That's a nice point. But until Pluto is in Aquarius, we've still got these few years to really, and by that point, those guys won't be in Aquarius anymore. So,
absolutely.
Like Pluto in Aquarius really feels like the transition, but we're in that teething stage. Like, not even now. Yes, Saturn's in Aquarius, which is giving us a preview. This is potent times we're in of this discovery of the new world, which will eventually be Aquarian age. But for me, I don't know if you agree, but I've always felt like when Pluto goes there, which none of those, those other planets won't be there, but I do find that this great conjunction, with Jupiter and Saturn at 0 Aquarius, that's quite a cataclysmic, we're moving into this air element, and it's going to be magical, it's going to be beautiful, but it's not Aquarian age yet. And like you said, whoever is saying that the Jupiter Pluto's Aquarian, like, you're fucking off your rocker, seriously. It's not even in fucking the sign of Aquarius.
Exactly. And the thing is, because Pluto is our soul's evolution. Okay, so whether it's personally our own personal Pluto, or whether it's Pluto collectively and the transit that he is making. So Pluto moving into Aquarius, I think he's going to be there for almost 28 years. It'll be until about 2048.
Yeah, so that's a long transit.
Yeah, because we're in the phase, like the way that Pluto works is like between Scorpio and Taurus, each sign gets longer. And then as we know from Taurus back through to Scorpio, it reduces in length. So each Pluto transit we're moving through collectively for like almost the next 180-ish or so years is deepening in length. So, just because Pluto then moves to 0 Aquarius in 2024 doesn't mean suddenly again the age of Aquarius is here, because I then believe once that's initiated, then Pluto's going to move into Pisces. That is going to be the true end of the Piscean age, because when we shift between these ages, like it takes 26,000 years. So with such a huge timeline, that kind of transit is not instantaneous. We don't just step into the age of Aquarius. So from what I've learned in the research I've been doing, they say that, December 21st, whatever, 2012, that was an initiation point. galactically.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a word, but anyway. So that became the point, but it takes about 100 to 150 years for that energy to integrate. So we are born at a time where most likely we're not going to see a lot of the changes of what people are psychically visioning. And this is the problem. I'm not discounting a lot of the 5D, New Earth, beautiful
Aquarian themed living in a way, right?
Yep. I'm not discounting what people are seeing, but when we look at astrology, the gift of that is it helps us break it down onto a timeline that we use here on Earth. Because if you have a body, I'm sorry, bro, but you're on fucking Earth. You're still in the 3D matrix. Like, there's not 144,000 people that are getting picked up in a spaceship and going off into 5D. No. And people can argue that with me till they're blue in the face. I don't give a shit. Like, that is not what we're moving into. Like, things take time. Like, time is slowed down. We're in a third dimensional reality. It's stepped down from so many dimensions. It has to work in a time that we as human beings can, you know, physically handle and cope with. And I didn't really kind of piece this together with that age of Pisces the other day about the shift. Like I said, Pluto Aquarius is going to give us that taste. It's going to help start to initiate and plant those seeds of this new Earth. But again, how does humanity work? It's like we kind of try something and we see if it fits, and then quite often we step back into what we know to fully let it go. And I think Pluto in Pisces is going to be that true kind of severance of that old world. So we've got a lot of time still, you know, to work through this stuff. There's no pressure. There's no, oh my God, I've got to have this green juice and do this yoga pose for when the fucking aliens come and pick me up tomorrow. Like, no, like.
Oh, no. Kill me now.
And like, I'm so Aquarius about, like, I would love to go in that spaceship. Like, take me to fucking Earth too. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But
the hologram just does it anyway. Let's be honest. The hologram does it anyway.
It's true. I mean, this is actually Katie too. Like, my hologram actually went somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we have to be practical about this. And that's what I love about astrology, is it brings practicality and logic to spirituality, you know?
Yes.
And when we merge the two, again, I'm not discounting.
I love that.
5D or certain spiritual ascension practices. Like, I read about Pleiadians constantly, and I'm all about that kind of realm and space, but like we can't get lost. And I think the main thing with the ending of the age of Pisces is that it's the end of people looking for a savior. And we can see this now in the chaos out in the world, how people are trying to latch on to still being saved by the government, by thinking Trump is like fucking the Lord Lizard King that's like rescuing children from pedophile caves. I mean, I just, like, Trump is not your savior. Like, if we end this on anything, it can be that no one is coming to save you except for yourself. And this time in isolation is assisting you in finding yourself. This is a fast track for humanity.
Bam.
For people that haven't had the time and space to do that. I don't even want to say inner work, but just like, who am I?
No,
like,
but it is that. It is that. And I think that if people miss this opportunity, you don't have to go into isolation and write a book and clean your whole house and do all the things to distract yourself from yourself, which everyone does anyway. Like, why keep distracting yourself from yourself? I do think that, you know, even me and Joel were talking, and he's like, this wake up call isn't for us, babe. Like, we live like this. We live close to our family, connected to our children. You know, I don't, you know, work and success and cars and money and all the things don't fucking matter to me, and my husband, you know, we've done, this isn't our lesson. This is a humanity lesson. Of course, we're going to learn things. I'm not saying we're fucking, you know, untouchable, but I'm just saying for so many humans, this is about them finally, you know, and to be honest, all of this Capricorn stuff has been leading here. Inner motherfucking authority. People don't have it. People don't understand it. They're not sovereign to themselves. They don't have inner authority because they keep latching to Mr. Lizard King, or they keep latching to fucking, I was going to say Malcolm Turnbull. I don't even know if he's our prime minister. I don't know. Whoever, Scott Morrison, who the hell cares? I don't even care. But ScoMo. And what is it, like ScoMo, Scotty from marketing, like whatever, right? But the thing is that it's the latching on and this total disconnect from their own sovereignty, from their own inner awareness and inner fucking just being of who you are. And that's, you know, and that's where this Aquarian bump will let us experience more of that, hopefully. And that's why, everything's shut down, to shut you down from distracting yourself from yourself, which people have been doing for centuries. So that's the thing, like there is so much magic to be had in this time, so much magic if you just look and you stop cleaning. Okay, like just look, like clean if you want. But it's these distractors. It's the people that have been home for a week already, and you know, they, you know, all the memes, oh, I hate my husband, I want to bury him, and all that stuff. I mean, there's a slight bit of truth to that, because you don't like spending time with yourself or with him. And I'm not saying this for everyone, I'm just saying, you know how happy you are in your marriage, in your home, in your career, all those things, right? But the thing is that this is such a collective wake up, but such an individual wake up, like so individual it's not funny. And we're seeing that, we're seeing structures, people, all of those things just crumble and just crumble and just crumble. And when we can, you know, save ourselves, which is really, and I loved what you said about, you know, astrology is practical. And I think that's probably because I love Saturn, you know, like Saturn is one of my homeboys. I love him. He's the best, you know, and everyone's like, oh, you've got Saturn in the 12th. That must be hard. Fuck no, man. It gives me the best like relationship with the universe and the entire cosmos. And guess what? It's disciplined as fuck. Absolutely. And it's disciplined. It's not this airy fairy. And I know me and Katie don't do airy fairy. Like, yes, we can go dimension hopping and she's a hologram and I can talk to aliens. Yes, we can all do those things, but that's not what's keeping us here as a physical human. Like this experience is our body, you know, and integrating these teachings. And that's why astrology is such a practical, wise, piece of magic that can ground you here while still being enlightened. There's nothing wrong with being enlightened as long as you've got your fucking shit together on earth.
And bells just go off right at that moment. So
ding ding ding.
Exactly. And that's it. It's about having your feet on the ground. Like, it's all well and good to be up here in the higher chakras. It's blissful and beautiful, but like if you're not doing anything practical with that, to actually, like, if you have this awareness, like your role is actually not going out and imposing what you know on other people, but just holding space and being that light. And if people are curious or resonate, they will find you. And that's how it starts to shift. But it's not about like going out, because that's again age of Pisces. Like all of these people that are, you know, I have this spiritual knowledge and I know this, like they're kind of no different to like, you know, like the priests that go out and try to sell shit to people in third world countries or whatever. I don't know, but that was good. Okay. That's how I see it, how a lot of people are still broaching it. Like we're still so entrenched in the old 2000 year cycle because it's time to shift out of. So remember that in terms of like, for those of you listening, like just breathe. Like you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to have all of this shit figured out, because it is a process that will take your entire lifetime. And that's what the cycles of astrology show us, how to move in flow with your own personal lifetime. And that's the beauty of it. There's no rush. I think.
Oh gosh, yeah. If we don't pull up now, we're here for another 2 hours. But I really think that, you know, this is a thing. Me and you getting on here and doing that, and I want to hear from anyone who's watching this if you would like this regularly, because we can talk about what's going on. You know, we did touch on Uranus and Taurus, and we probably could have talked about that for ages, and we tangent, and this is just what we do. But this has been so deeply fulfilling and nourishing for me to be talking to Katie, because obviously she's not in Australia anymore, and I don't get my little random hugs every now and again when I'm in Melbourne, but you know, for us to be able to do this, because you know we are so aligned. We've still got different voices, but we're so aligned. And I just think that the coming together of this, and I maybe could have actually shared this when we stopped recording, but anyway, I just feel I feel called to say, if you want more of this, let us know, because for me, I'm happy to carve out an hour or two, maybe an hour, you know, on certain topics for us to dive into more astrology and all this sort of stuff, because this is what we do every day anyway. So sharing it with everyone is, you know, what we're here to do. And this forum works. It's brilliant. You don't even have to have a video. You can just listen to it audio. So it all just aligns beautifully. So I'd love to hear anyone's feedback around us doing more of these, because I actually want to do them. So
I want to do them too. This has been great. I'm like, I would have just been like sitting in bed, like scrolling Instagram all morning. So like, it's been nice to kind of get out of my bed and move to the living room and probably go straight back to bed in 5 minutes.
That's okay. We're talking all good things.
It's been amazing. And this is
so great
that we finally put this together. So absolutely, for those of you listening, if you want this more, like, let us know, because we can absolutely carve out this time together. No problem. Like I said, we carve it out together anyway. But to be able to bring it and share it with you guys is such a gift and such a joy. So my love.
And I'm even thinking like astrology conversations with Katie and Tiarnie. Like that's what it's called.
Exactly. So simple. So beautiful.
Yeah. Simple, practical.
Yes.
You know, what we're all about.
And, you know, I just realized one last thing. Like, we were talking so much about the squares before. And like, you know, with you being a Taurus and me being an Aquarius, like the dynamic that we actually have is that square energy. Like we are bringing, like, even though we resonate with a lot of things, we're broaching it from such a different fixed perspective, which is probably why we can sometimes be like a bit harsh, but it's always with love, guys. Like always with love.
Of course. I only say everything because I want everyone to be empowered and to know who they are. That's the only thing that comes from me. Like that is my deal. So I love you. I love everyone out there. I love humanity.
Amazing. Thank you so much for today. We will definitely be back soon. Lots of love.
We will.
And talk to you
Lots
guys
of love.
Okay. Bye.